So in the next few videos, we're going to explore the UGUI or Unity Graphical User Interface System, often just known as the UI system or the User Interface System. And what this allows us to do is give some sort of interface for the player to interact with. That can be buttons, it can be dials, it can be just text, but it basically overlays our game. And the UGUI system was introduced in Unity 4.6 and was allows a visual manipulation of the GUI system as opposed to the old system, often just known as the GUI. And that's how we created buttons for the day-night cycle earlier. So what we're going to look to do here is update that a little bit using the new UGUI system. So if we go up to our hierarchy and create, you can see an option here for UI or user interface. And these are all the pre-built components that we can add to a UI. These are just effectively prefabs with the appropriate components added to them. So the first thing we're going to do is track the number, or rather display the number of collectibles that the player has collected. In a previous video, we created these collectible spheres here. So I click on those and open up the Playmaker script here. You can see we had a couple states here, and once it was collected, we added one to this global variable. I called it spheres collected. You can see here under variables, it's a global. So we're already tracking the number of spheres, but we're not displaying it to the player, and that's what we want to do next. And we need our UI to do that. So under create, we're going to go to UI, and we're just going to use a text to do that. Okay, so once I add that text, you'll notice that a few other things got added. That text is the child of a canvas. So all UI components have to be a child of a canvas. You can have multiple canvases, that's fine, but they have to be the child of a canvas. It also added this event system. If I click on this event system, go to my inspector, these components here are effectively what allows the computer to know that you're clicking or interacting with the UI system. If this somehow gets deleted, you can go up to UI and add another event system. That'll work. But you have to have one in order for your UI to work properly. This canvas it's the parent. It tells the computer how to draw everything. There's a lot of options here that you can explore later. Maybe one of the more important options here is the render mode. There's three options here, two of which I use fairly frequently. The screen space overlay is the default option, and so this just overlays your UI on top of your game. There's also a world space. This allows you to put a canvas into the three-dimensional space of the game, and it gets displayed in 3 dimensions. So if you want to have a health bar above somebody or a label on something in the game, this is how you would do it. And so those are probably the most important options. You can play with some of these other options here, and they have some uses, but they get a little bit more sophisticated. Okay, so let's double click on our canvas here and see what it created. Contrary maybe to what I just said, or what sounds contrary to what I just said, this screen space overlay, it is physically in the scene here, but it doesn't get rendered or displayed as if it's at that location. You also notice that it's really large. You can see here the width and the height. We normally would think of this as pixels, and it is. This canvas right now will be 1133 pixels wide, but it's also 1133 Unity units wide. I almost said Blender units there. So it's very, very large, and that's okay. It's just the way Unity does it. If I click here on my text object, you can see that we've got a little bit different interface. I'm already on the rect transform. I can use the normal transform tool to move it around if I want. You can even rotate this thing because again, it is 3D space. You can use a scaling tool and scale it up. But this rect transform is probably the most useful piece of it. I can grab it in the middle, move it around very easily. I can grab the corners and resize, and grab a side and resize pretty quick and easy. You'll also notice this dot here in the middle, which is called the pivot. You can toggle here, up here, center or pivot. If you're in center, you just move it around. If you're on pivot, you'll also be able to grab the pivot and move it. And the pivot is the point where that UI element will grow from. A little bit beyond this tutorial, but the idea is that UI has to change size because people's monitors are different resolutions, games get played in different resolutions, and so they've got to resize. And this is the point that it'll grow from. So if right now with it in the center, if this canvas gets larger, the text itself is just going to grow from this point here. It's going to go out. Maybe if I put this in the corner up here, kind of it'll snap in the corner. Maybe I don't want it to do that because it could go up beyond the edge of the canvas and not be seen. So I might take my point and drop it on the corner. So it's going to grow out of that corner. It's going to get bigger this way. Okay. Also, you'll notice these 4 arrows here, 4 triangles here. These are called the anchors, and these also have some control on how the object grows or how it stays or how it grows relative to its parent. And yes, that is a little confusing that you have a pivot controlling how it grows and you have anchors depending on how it grows. Okay. Essentially, though, these anchors are they're anchoring the UI object. So right now it's centered right here in the middle, and so if this canvas grows or changes size, this object's not going to change size relative to its parent. So one way you can play around with this a little bit, and it takes some time to build up your intuition a little bit. You can go to game here in free aspect. You can change the ratios here for different monitors. You can see here I have specific sizes here, so I can actually say go to 1080p, come back to my scene, and you'll notice that something's happened to my text. Right. My text didn't actually change size, but it did appear to move because these anchors are anchored to the middle. And so what that's doing is keeping the effectively the relative position between these anchors and the UI element the same. So if I didn't want that to happen, so let's go back to free aspect. So I should be back in the center there. What I can do is change where my anchors are. And I do that here with inside this component here, the rect transform. Okay, so I click on this box here. I have a bunch of preset options. So maybe I want it to stick in the corner. Okay, so I can choose that option. And my anchors are going to go to the top corner right there. So if I go back to my game, change my aspect again, go back to 1080p. Okay, you notice my canvas got substantially larger. I'm still there. You'll also notice that the size of this did not change, and you can see that over here in my width and my height. It's changed the same. So let's try this one more way. Let's go back to free aspect. Okay, size stayed the same, but maybe I want this element to grow vertically. So what I can do here is click this option here, which is going to anchor it to the side, but allow growth vertically. And what that's done is split my anchors like that. Okay, so let's see what happens now if I go to a larger or a different aspect. Okay, you'll notice that the UI element grew with my canvas or the parent object. Okay. Now, that may or may not be what I want it to do. Go back to free aspect here, go back to my normal size. A handy way that's a little bit more convenient to what most people want it to do is actually to put the anchors on the corners. And what this is going to do is allow this child to grow proportional to its parent. So let's line up here so we can kind of see what it looks like. If you want a perfect line up here, you can select the negative z-axis here, and it'll line you up. You can also put yourself in orthographic mode. which can help with some of the proportion or perspective issues. So let's go back to our game. In free aspect, let's go again back to 1080p. Canvas got much larger, and you can see that my object got larger, but it stayed proportional to the rest of the screen. And in general, this is what people want. They don't want the UI changing sizes all over the place. There are some different options there. You also notice that once I split my anchors, what is shown here in my rect transform is now very different. I got a custom setting here. I no longer have width and height, but I have bottom, her left, top, right, and bottom, which is a little bit more difficult to work with, admittedly. Again, you can play around with that as you go. You can also set your anchors manually here by numbers, as well as your pivot. Most of these numbers are based on 0 to 1. You'll notice here that this minimum anchor here in the X direction is 0.77, and what that's referencing is that in the X direction we are 77% of the way across the screen. The Y one, the minimum Y is 89% of the way from the bottom. 0, 0 being down here in the bottom left corner. Okay, so that's some of the basics of the GUI system. There's a lot going on here, so play around with it and see what you can do. Now let's get back to the main goal here, and that is to display our number of collectibles. So let's go to our text element here, and you'll notice here that my text is very, very small, and we want to change that size. So as we click on the text, we can see our text component over here. Now we can manually enter in a font size, 25, 50, whatever you need. And if I go to my game view, you can see the text is getting displayed in my top right corner. Pretty hard to see, so let's change the color here to something much lighter. We can go almost white. You can also adjust your alpha here. Often a little bit of transparency looks pretty good. Doesn't need to be a lot, but just a little tends to look good. There's also this option here of best fit. You can click best fit, and it'll give you an option here of minimum size to maximum size. We're already maxed out, but if I wanted to create a bigger text, I can allow it to be bigger. And what this is going to do is just auto fit the size of the text. You may or may not want that. I'm going to actually turn that off and just leave it as size 50. Gonna then change the alignment here. I'm going to center it horizontally, and or actually I'm going to put it all the way over the edge there and center it vertically. And you can see what's going on there. Now, again, maybe I don't like it that close to my corner, so I can come back to my scene view and move it over a little bit and give myself a little bit of a gap. I'm gonna readjust my anchors as well. Okay. All right. So there I've got my text. It's displaying, I can read it. But now we need a way to update this text, and we're going to do that using Playmaker. So just for convenience, I'm going to go to my canvas object, and I'm going to add a Playmaker FSM to this component. I kind of like to keep my scripts or my FSMs on the parent object, just a little bit easier to find. If you want to put it on the text object itself, that is also okay. So add that component, and I'm going to call this sphere counter, because in my game I'm just collecting spheres. Press edit to open up the Playmaker window, and we don't need a lot going on here. We actually just need one state, but that state needs to update the text. So if I go to actions and I search for text, you'll see things here that's GUI, GUI element, GUI layout, but we don't have anything for the new UGUI system. In order to do that, we're going to need to download what's called the ecosystem browser. So if you go up to Playmaker, and I've already done this, but I can show you how to do this. We'll go to Playmaker, add-ons, and go to download add-ons. That's going to open up a window that looks like this in your browser. Okay. So I got a couple of them open. And this is the one we want, this ecosystem browser. And so what this is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a browser that allows you to search through a bunch of custom actions that have been added by the community. I'm not exactly sure how they get selected. There's some sort of filtering process to make sure they work and they're in there. You can also see that there are some built-in Unity packs. There is a Unity UI, and you can add that one in. I tend to not like to just bloat my project, so this one will bring in everything you need. We can still find all those actions one at a time through the browser, so that's the way I'm gonna do it. Also, if you look down here, you can access actions for third-party add-ons. So some of my favorite, like Easy Save 2, which is a great program. You can use Playmaker Actions. G2U. This is a great spreadsheet data management tool. There's a lot of things here that have Playmaker Actions. So you can find them here. But what we're after is the ecosystem browser. So you can click on the ecosystem browser. And then this option right here, Ecosystem Browser Package, you can download this. It's gonna download the Unity package. And you can just click and drag this into Unity. I'm not gonna do that because I've already, well, I guess I can go ahead and do that. I can drag and drop that into Unity, and it's gonna give me this import window. Now, I've already imported it, so you should have all kinds of files here. Press OK and let that compile. Once you've done that, you can go back up to Playmaker, Add-ons, Ecosystem, and then Ecosystem Browser. There's also a handy shortcut here. So click on that, and it's going to open up a ecosystem window. And yours is probably going to look like this with the disclaimer here. Go ahead and read that if you'd like. And then there's a button here. Yours will probably be green. It says go to Ecosystem. And I'm going to just go back to the browser. So here we just get to search for things. What are we trying to do? So in this case, we're trying to update a UGUI text. So we're going to search for UGUI and text. Press enter. And this second option is what we want. UGUI text set text. We're going to set the text. Sometimes you can hit a preview that takes you to GitHub if you want to look at the code. This is written in C#. There can be documentation sometimes. There's nothing for this one. So we're just going to get this one. It downloads it. Unity compiles it. And again, this is just a script. Every action is just a script. I'm going to close the ecosystem browser. And you'll notice now here in our action browser, we've got a new option here, UGUI, and the UGUI set text. So that's what we want. So I'm going to click on my state. And we're going to add this UGUI action. Now it's giving us a little warning here because this object does not have a text component on it. So we're going to change the game object from useOwner to specify game object. And we're going to drag and drop the text into there. Okay. And we can now type in whatever we want. We can go with the classic hello world. Okay. And I come back to my game. Nothing's happened. But if I push play, I get my updated text. Okay. So we're updating our text. Step one. But we want this to be getting this global variable. So what we need is we need to take this global variable, which is an integer, and turn it into a string. So let's search in our action browser for int to string. Okay, and again, a string is it's a bunch of characters, it's a bunch of letters, and that's what gets displays in a text. So let's double click on that. We'll add that in. Let's make sure we move that up to the top. So that's going to happen first, and we're going to get an integer variable, and that's our global variable we created earlier, spheres collected. And we need to turn it into a string variable. So we got to create that variable. So let's create a new variable. Let's call it number of spheres. Make sure we set this to a type of string and add that. Okay. Back to the state and set that number of spheres. Now there's some formatting here. I haven't played with that one very much, but you can, I think, set the type of the formatting that you want. And we want to do this every frame. Every frame we want to check how many spheres have collected and turn it into a string. And then down here in our set text, we don't want to be able to, we don't want to be typing in the variable. We want to, or rather, we don't want to type in the string. We want it to display this variable, and we want this to be doing this every frame as well. Okay. Okay. So you can see I now have a 0 there. I collect my sphere. And we're now tracking how many spheres we've collected. So let's look at how to make this a little bit more sophisticated. Maybe we want to give our player a little bit of context. So we're not just displaying a number here. We want to say number of coins collected, or in my case, the number of spheres collected. So to do that, we need to add on to our string. I guess we could put another text element above it that said spheres collected and then just the number below it. Or what we can do is have the computer type out or write out spheres collected and then the number right after it. To do that, we've got to do a little bit of work with the string here. So let's go back to Playmaker, go to the Action Browser, and search for string. So an option here is, down here under string, is build string. And if I look at it here, this looks like probably what we would want to do it with. We can have a number of string parts, and they're add together, and we can store our result. So let's add that into our state here, and I just need 2 parts. So the first one here, element 0, is going to be spheres collected. I put a little colon and a space in there, and the second element is going to be this number of spheres. So it's just going to put these 2 together. Put a separator in if you want. I don't need that at the moment. And we're going to store this result. I'm going to store it as number of spheres. We're just going to kind of write over the top of it. And we're going to do that every frame as well. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now I got spheres collected. As I collect my spheres, my label is still there. Spheres collect, that's nice grammar there. But we're just updating the number, and our player has a little bit more context as to what that number means. So there you go. I think that's going to do it for our first video for this project, working with the UGUI system. The next video, we're going to look at adding in buttons. So the player can click on something and have an action happen. Not any more complex, and should actually be a shorter, quicker video than this one. So thanks for joining. Hope it was helpful. I'll see you next time.